That is the new Mercedes-Benz CLA, a badge that's making a long-awaited comeback to India. Now, if Karan was making the introduction to this video, he'd tell you how the CLA has more curves than the Instagram influencer that he stalks. What? How it has more illumination up front than the ring light he uses to make OnlyFans content.
Oh, bro.
And how this has enough branding on the outside to put to shame the outfit that a newly found Indian rapper with newfound fame and money wears on the red carpet. But he isn't making the introduction, I am. So I'm going to tell you why this has more tech than your phone, how the aerodynamics on this will make a razor feel as blunt as that apartment building behind me, and how underneath all this CLA prettiness, this thing is a real, genuine electric powerhouse. Before we tell you how it drives and give you a lowdown on why I called it an electric powerhouse, let's talk about the way this looks. Gone is the EQ design language. Mercedes has admitted that it messed up doing two different designs on, say, an S-Class and an EQS, which is why the new CLA Electric, which is this, looks like the petrol one. Apart from, of course, the grille. 143 stars in this. Well, 142 smaller ones and one big one, which is, of course, illuminated. So are the smaller stars. And if you really do a count of how many badges and how many little Mercedes logos there are on the whole car, you've got 142, 143, 44, one on the back, that's 45, 4 on the wheels, that's 149. And then if you really look closely, like really closely, on the windscreen, on every glass pane, there are 6 of them, or 1 each. So do the math. And if you really want to go into detail, you've got this little 3-pointed arrangement on the headlight. And you've also got it on the tail light, but we'll talk about the tail light when we get there. You've also got the connected light bar in the front, like we expect on every car recently launched in the world. But the CLA-ness, that's still there, because what they've kept are the frameless doors. What they've kept is the fact that the swooping tail or the swooping roofline still is as it is. And although this is a larger car, and even though the battery underneath is 10 centimeters high, they've not actually gone super high on the car. It is about 3 centimeters taller than the last one, or 30 mm longer or taller than the last generation CLA. And then we get to the rear. Now this is something that's interesting because Merc has made it a point to do the connected light bar across almost every single one of its cars, with the exception of, say, the G-Class, right? But what they've done in the past is they've done a horizontal lighting element. And in fact, every other automaker in the world has done the horizontal lighting element. Mercedes, in this case, in the case of the CLA, has gone slightly different. So if you come closer, see these small little elements? There are, I believe, 42 of them in the whole tail lamp structure. And then, of course, as we mentioned, the star thing in the back as well. Now, we've seen this on the E-Class in India. This is a little more obvious. That's the word we were looking for. Interesting bit of trivia here, by the way. Apparently, there is some vague European law that says that you can't illuminate a logo or a badge if it is not in the center of the car and more than 10 centimeters in diameter. So officially, Mercedes says that these tail lights and headlamp motifs are not really logos. Yeah, sure. Frankly, they look nice to me, although I'm guessing there are a few of you here who are watching this now who have very strong opinions on how this car looks. So, let it rip in the comments section. Everything on the CLA on the inside seems so familiar, but it's so brand new. Because if you are a recent Mercedes-Benz driver, you know that everything here is completely different. So for example, you've got the typical Mercedes AMG steering wheel with the little slat in the middle, which honestly is really quite nice, although it does have capacitive buttons, and I know some of you hate it. But then you have these dual screens here. In fact, on some cars, you'll get a third screen as a passenger option. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But everything they've done on the CLA, they've just sort of taken stuff that's from the higher end cars, the EQS, for example, and made it smaller. Like this key, for example, is just a smaller version, a slightly sort of reduced, maybe by 60% reduced version of the one on the larger cars. But overall, there are some bits and pieces that are unique to the CLA, which I've never seen before, and they really stand out. You know how much I love little details. So this, for example, the typical Mercedes-Benz sort of seat adjustment stuff that's been around for ages. Even my SL from like 27 years ago has that on the door pads. But this is unique. This is all knurled aluminum. And this is the kind of stuff that sort of sets the CLA apart. But what really sets it apart are the screens. Okay, I haven't even counted how many stars are in that panel there, but I bet it's way too many to even bother counting. All right, let's get back to the dashboard, because you get a 10-inch infotainment screen for the sort of driver, which of course has multiple functions. We've seen that in the past, but this one is even clearer. It's got a slightly new display as well, and that's because this uses the 4th generation MBUX. It's a completely new one. It's called MBOS, or Mercedes-Benz Operating System. And what it basically does is it takes stuff that we've learned so many years over from things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and that sort of look and feel, and imitates it into the system. Now you get a big 14-inch screen in the center, and then of course this little pane could be the 3rd passenger screen. Now I don't know if the car that comes to India will get that passenger screen or not, but we do get a very high spec standard in India usually, so we might get a screen there. We don't really know for sure. We'll actually tell you as sort of closer we get to the launch of this car. Now, between the time we shot this and the time you see this, there's actually been a fair bit of time that has gone past, and I did some digging, and I now know that the India spec will most likely not get the 3rd screen, which in my opinion is a bit of a pity. That is mainly to cut down on the landed pricing, as this is going to be a CBU. And remember, this is the actual competition to the inevitable launch of the Tesla Model 3. Now, one of the biggest problems on the CLA was not the engine, not the gearbox, not the way it handled. It actually did handle really well, but the fact that there was almost no space in the rear. I've actually once been driven from Mumbai to Pune in the back of a CLA 45, and I can tell you for a fact that I do not want to do it again. This, however, is the largest CLA that there has ever been. So let's see if there is any space for somebody as large as me in it. Okay, now one must remember, I am a large human being with a very messed up knee, so getting in and out of any car is a bit of a nightmare. But let's shut this. In the previous gen CLA, I would barely fit. My legs would definitely not fit. This is still small, this is still slightly uncomfortable for me, and frankly the floor is slightly higher than what I had expected, especially for rear seat passengers, because, well, you do have a slightly higher set seat in terms of your base. But overall, I mean, there is definitely a lot more space as compared to, say, the last gen CLA. That said, there's a bit of an issue because the glass goes down only that much, and that means if I want to sort of show somebody some rude hand gestures, maybe I can. But if I do want to actually get, say, a large Coke from my McDonald's order, I can't, which upsets me. Right then, time to buckle up and tell you how this drives, because this is crucial for Mercedes globally, and if they have messed this up, ooh, baby, tough days ahead. Now, when I said earlier in this video that this thing is an absolute electric powerhouse, I meant it, because the headlines this thing makes as an entry-level Mercedes-Benz product is what it's all about. Now remember, the EQ experiment, as you want to call, hasn't really worked, right? Mercedes has almost admitted to the fact that maybe they were too early with it, or it hasn't really worked, or the cars weren't perfect, etc, etc. My thought process is the EQ experiment, or the EQ cars, were a stopgap. This generation, this stuff now, is what's really what we expect from Mercedes-Benz as an engineering company to actually put out for people, right? So the headline figures are insane. 792 kilometers of range from an 85 kilowatt hour battery. That's insane. 800 volt architecture. This is the cutting edge new architecture that Mercedes has, and frankly, this sort of underpinnings, the motor, the battery pack, are all the most advanced, probably the best stuff that you can buy or you can get in a mass market electric car out there. So they're still on the cutting edge of things, even though that they're electric, and even though most of you won't really care or like what this car is all about. I mean, even stuff like the cables, for example, that connect the motor and the battery pack have been lightened, made thinner, made more efficient in general, to sort of cut down on weight, cut down on transmission losses, etc. That's the kind of thought process Mercedes has gone into. There are of course a lot of people who will expect this to be absurdly fast, like 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. But it isn't. It does a generally slow for an EV 6.7. One also expects some 7 bazillion horsepower. It doesn't get those. It gets 272. But imagine them to be the equivalent of Rustam Pelwan's Raksh, a mythological horse from Persian culture that always got the job done and was extraordinarily intelligent.
The other thing that's really cool is, just like the Porsche Taycan, this thing has a 2-speed gearbox at the back. Now remember, the motor is mounted at the back where the spare wheel sort of is, or under the seat if you want to get really particular about it. And it is absolutely seamless. We thought that we'd feel the first gear to second gear shift, but we didn't. We don't at all. Now in the Taycan you actually do feel it. In this, it was completely seamless.
It also feels as solid as a bank vault when you're in it. Trust me, this is a fact, because recent Mercs have been slightly poorly built. This doesn't feel like that. But don't expect a big thud when you shut the door like a G-Class, because this car of course does get frameless doors. It also feels slightly stiffer in terms of suspension setup, and although that is great for handling, that might be a bit of an issue when it comes to comfort on our horrible road conditions.
Also, I'm a little bit worried about the ground clearance, because although the CLA in this generation is slightly taller and we might get a slightly taller package on our suspension overall, the battery pack is right below and it's a flat floor, and it might scrape a couple of bumps or a couple of speed breakers and stuff like that.
Above everything else though, what truly makes a big impression is how Mercedes has finally got this absolutely where it needs to be. And remember, this is still an entry-level model. This is still the beginning of their range. When all of this tech goes into their larger cars with bigger batteries, that's when their car-making prowess will really start to show. We aren't too far, in my opinion, from a production car with over 1,000 kilometers in range, and that's diesel levels.
So there you have it. That's the new Mercedes-Benz CLA, which is coming to India. As we mentioned, it's going to come at about 60 lakh rupees as an electric car, first in 2025, the end of 2025, and then as a petrol-powered hybrid sometime in 2026. What do you guys think about the car? Do you think Mercedes has done a good job, one, with the tech that they've given, and two, with the way it looks and feels? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. This is coming to India again, as I mentioned, very soon. So stay tuned for an updated drive when the car actually makes it to our shores. This will be a great daily driver, man, in my opinion. If people really do want an affordable, relatively affordable German electric car that looks cool, this is going to give the iX1 a real run for its money.